If you were a dinosaur-obsessed kid born after 1999, you're probably at least vaguely aware of the juggernaut that was Walking with Dinosaurs. If you're like me, then you're probably also aware of all the sequels, spin-offs, movies,
Dad!
And other such parts of the Walking With franchise. But one venture you might not know the series had: video games! Yeah, shockingly, Walking With had quite a number of video games based on it, though I don't blame you for not knowing about most of them, since 1. Walking with Beasts Operation Salvage was a Command & Conquer clone never released in the United States, and the other, Wonderbook Walking with Dinosaurs, was on a peripheral that not very many people owned and only had 4 games made for it. However, it did have a crap ton of Flash games, and I remember these Flash games very well. I have very fond childhood memories of many of the Walking with Beasts-based ones, though sadly not the Evolution game. I have heard this one's great, but I've never been able to track it down. Others, like the Big Owl game, Walking with Caveman's Caveman Challenge, and the Sea Monsters Adventure game, which I almost did a deep dive on, but sadly the version available via the Flash Museum is broken. But these aren't the games we're looking at today. What we're looking at today is a game you had to download directly onto your damn computer. Ladies and gentlemen, and others, welcome to Dinosaur World. Dinosaur World was released in June of 2001. Hey, that's the month I was born. Developed by Asylum Entertainment in collaboration with the BBC. Asylum has pretty much only developed licensed games other than this one, and seemed most active in the early to mid-2000s, as the last game credited to them, Horrid Henry, the Good, the Bad, and the Bugly, was released back in 2011. Now, on the BBC's website, where you used to be able to download this game, it's listed as a prototype, and you can kind of tell, as the game itself is tiny, only about 44 megabytes, and that's the high-spec version. It does make me wonder if there were possibly more plans for this game than we see here, as there was a series of point-and-click games on the BBC's website called Dinosaur Worlds that were based on each of Walking with Dinosaurs' 6 episodes. This makes me wonder if there were perhaps plans to make a Dinosaur World-type game for each of the show's episodes, but they only got to making one based on Time of the Titans / The Ballad of Big Owl, because that was the newest story at the time. In any case, if those were planned at some point, it obviously never came to fruition, and the alpha build is the only version of the game you have available.
Allosaurus had never seen such bullshit before.
It really shouldn't come as a surprise that, like most older games, this game has some issues being installed on modern systems. Pretty much every computer me or my family has owned, I've tried installing this game on it, and on almost every single one it hasn't worked. It would almost always get to the install screen, start installing, and then crash right before it finished. And indeed, on my first attempt to play it again here, that's what happened. Until I tried installing the game by running the installer on Windows 98 compatibility. And for some reason this worked. And as a result, for the first time since I was like 11, I can finally play Dinosaur World. Dinosaur World is what I think the kids these days call a walking simulator, as there's very little in the actual gameplay department. There's no weapons to collect, no real enemies to fight, none of that unwholesomeness that society today hates. Rather, the goal of the game is to find a set of organisms and a set of objects, of which both are spread through the game's 5 areas. The game's controls are fine. They respond like you'd expect, and there aren't any notable delays in them, but for some modern gamers, some of the bindings may be a bit off. For one, WASD isn't used for movement, but rather the arrow keys. Or the mouse buttons, left-click to walk forward, right-click to walk backwards. And rather than use shift for running, the game instead uses the control key. Other than that, though, I didn't find the game's controls bad or confusing, but unfortunately, one of the mechanics is sadly unusable on most modern systems. You see, one of the game's mechanics is to place stakeout cameras in areas the player wants to quickly teleport to using the map screen, and the player is given 8 to places they wish. It's a good system, but to place a camera, you need to hit F1, which is the mute button on my laptop, and I couldn't find any way to rebind the keys, so I wasn't able to use this actually pretty useful mechanic. Graphically, while the game is obviously dated by today's standards, I actually don't think it looks too bad for 2001. Bear in mind, this was still when doing fully 3D environments in first person was tricky, and while the game does occasionally cheat using sprites for certain assets, I overall think that for 2001, the game looks good, like something you'd see on a console or PC of the time. An interesting note is that the game is actually running on the same graphical engine used for the show's CGI effects, which is a neat detail, I think. Alas, while they got the graphics engine of the show, Ben Bartlett's score didn't come with it. In fairness, though, the game's actual music is pretty good in my opinion, very atmospheric and fitting the environments where they get used. While there's only 6 music tracks in the game, they're all quite good, though sadly not memorable enough for me to regularly listen to them outside of the game. As you'd expect from a game still in alpha state upon release, the game is more than a little bit glitchy, with the few pieces of coverage this game gets online often talking about the plethora of glitches and bugs they encountered. Shockingly, I didn't run into very many of these when playing the game, and none of the ones I ran into were game-breaking. The very few I saw were some weird camera issues when tagging and untagging a dinosaur, which you can easily fix by just tagging it again, and some occasional out-of-bounds clipping. Other than that, I'm shocked to say that for a game that was never finished, the game is actually remarkably stable. But okay, I've gone on long enough about this. It's time to actually play the game. The game starts you out on a mossy plain in the Jurassic period. Very quickly, you can knock some items off your checklist by examining some Araucaria, or monkey puzzle trees, tree ferns, some Diplodocus, consisting of 3 individuals, and a low-poly nightmare the game claims is a dragonfly. Walking up to an organism or object will usually cause the narrator to speak about some fun facts relating to whatever you interacted with.
Diplodocus are a kind of sauropod, the largest land animals ever to have lived. This giant could be up to 60 or more years old. Diplodocus travel in herds of up to 20 animals, a mixture of adults and youngsters. The largest and oldest individuals lead the group, searching for fresh patches of forest.
By pressing T when you're a dinosaur, you can tag them and move with them. This system really only has one purpose for later on, but speedrunners, yes, this game has a speedrunning community, because what doesn't at this point, have found that you can actually clip out of bounds with this and beat the game incredibly quickly. But since the game already takes maybe 20 minutes tops to beat, around 40 if you decide to 100% it, I don't really see the point. Plus, to actually clip out of bounds, you need to swing the mouse around like crazy, and that just makes me sick. In terms of discoveries in this area, you can find some small pools through which you can see some weird cube at the bottom of the game, a fumarole, and some rocky outcroppings. Overall, a fine starting area that branches off well into 3 of the game's other locations. To be frankly honest, I'm not entirely sure why the dry riverbed is a sub-area in and of itself. Its terrain looks near identical to that of the mossy plain, and there's only 2 discoveries here. The only real indication that this is a new area is the map screen identifying it as one, and the music playing here being different from the rest of the game. Though in fairness, this is one of my favorite tracks. Those 2 discoveries consist of a set of footprints, which are really hard to see, and some trickling water at the back of the riverbed? Okay. Once again, I don't see why this couldn't have just been an extension of the mossy plain. It isn't as if they were above putting a higher number of discoverable objects in an area, as both the forest and desert have 4, so why couldn't the mossy plain, the main hub of the game, have 5? Really, the only other notable thing back here is an Allosaurus feeding on a Diplodocus, but for some reason, this Allosaurus not only doesn't count for your checklist, but you can't tag her either. Just why? This area does allow me to explain another mechanic of the game I haven't mentioned yet, the news events. While exploring, the player may be interrupted by the narrator announcing something that has happened somewhere in the game world. This does add some replay value to the game, as it is possible to beat the game without seeing all of them. I say these occur randomly, but that's not entirely true, as there is one that will always occur once you've completed the checklist, but I'll get back to that later. In any case, on occasions, a second Allosaurus will appear in the riverbed to challenge the first one. The game does hint that this could happen, mentioning you should place a stakeout camera here.
If you leave a stakeout camera here, you can watch it eat.
Interestingly, you also can't tag this Allosaurus. The fact that the narrator mentions how risky it is for the intruding Allosaurus to challenge the older original killer would seem to suggest the fight could go either way, but I've never once seen the OG Allosaurus actually win the fight, so I think it's scripted for the intruder to always win. After that, it basically becomes the same boring sub-area it started as, just with a dying Allosaurus now stuck in the corner. From a side path in the mossy plain, you can enter the Redwood Forest, very clearly based on the one seen in Time of the Titans, a nice reference to the show the game is based on. The only organism you can find in this forest are the redwood trees themselves. The first discovery here you're going to run across, as it's right on the beaten path, is a fallen redwood tree. Interestingly, some unused code suggests this tree was actually going to fall in-game as a news event, but this event in particular was cut for unknown reasons. Maybe it just wasn't interesting enough? At the back of the forest is an Allosaurus nest buried by the earth. This appears to be a combination of the Allosaurus nest seen in the Ballad of Big Al, but it's buried in a forested region like the Diplodocus nest in Time of the Titans. An interesting combination of both stories. After some time passes, the player may be informed of how the Allosaurus nest has been raided, a clear callback to the Ornitholestes raiding the Diplodocus nest in Time of the Titans. As with the Allosaurus intruding on the riverbed, the game does hint something may happen here, recommending you place a stakeout camera near the nest.
This mound of earth and vegetation is actually the nest of an Allosaurus. If you set a stakeout camera here, you may catch a glimpse of her.
This does raise the question, though. Where is the Ornitholestes? After all, you can hear it throughout the area, and the narrator explicitly pins it as the culprit in the nest raiding.
Too early for the eggs in this nest to have hatched, so the nest has probably been raided. There are many small carnivorous dinosaurs and mammals which could be responsible. The bird-like dinosaur, Ornitholestes, is the most likely culprit.
But the actual animal, in all of its inaccurate Walking with Dinosaurs glory, is missing in action. I guess modeling a 6th low-poly animal would have been too much for this alpha? After some more time, the mother Allosaurus will return, thoroughly angry that her nest has been disturbed. So angry, in fact, that she just stands there and roars at nothing.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
Weirdly, you actually can tag this Allosaurus, which makes the inability to do it with the dry riverbed Allosauruses even stranger. At the very back of the forest is a tunnel entrance, which strangely is not a sub-area, even though it easily could have been made one like the dry riverbed. No, I'm still not over that stupid riverbed. Inside the tunnel are some stalactites, which also count towards your discovery list. Exiting out of the tunnel, you'll find yourself in the crater area, a rather small area, though one that at least feels different enough to be counted as a proper area. If you somehow miss the low-poly nightmare dragonfly in the mossy plain, you can find it here too. And the Benetatalis are also able to be found here, though if you go to the desert first, you can find them there as well. The only 3 discoveries in this area are the crater's lake,
Does anyone know how to get to the lake? The lake.
some flies you can barely see, and a multi-tuberculate skeleton. I haven't brought it up yet, but apparently quite a lot of people think this game is kind of scary. Now you know why this is going up on Halloween, The game in general feels very isolated in a lot of areas, with the forest and the crater being the best examples. Aside from the randomly appearing Allosaurus in the forest and the low-poly nightmare dragonfly in the crater, there's nothing here, leaving you alone with the music, which doesn't help, as a lot of people think the music in these areas feel pretty eerie. I'll admit that as an easily overstimulated kid, the sheer volume of the game also made me pretty uneasy when playing it as a child, to the point that I'd often play the game on mute. Easily the biggest area in the game, the desert is reached via a long pathway connected once again to the mossy plain. In addition to the possibly missable in the crater Benetatalis, you can also find cycads here, and my personal favorite creature in the game, this very, very derpy Allosaurus, attempting, and I do mean attempting, to hunt 3 Diplodocus, also wandering this central hub area. I actually do have to applaud the game's Dinosaur AI, as it seems this is where the developers spent the most time on. While it's a bit glitchy due to still being in perpetual alpha, the dinosaurs do actually interact with each other quite well. The Allosaurus can successfully hunt a Diplodocus, but it can also fail and even die if you spend enough time out here. It's impressive and clearly what the devs thought was most important for the game. In terms of discoveries, this central area has some rock arches, some bones, and some broken cycads. Flying over the central area are a pair of extremely low-poly pterosaurs. While the models are clearly based on the Rhamphorhynchus from Cruel Sea, Walking with Dinosaurs' third episode, the game never identifies them as such, likely because the devs knew that Rhamphorhynchus, even being as big a wastebasket taxon as it was in 2001, didn't inhabit North America. In the far back area of the desert, you can find the game's only Stegosaurus, wandering about and, honestly, just not doing much. It just stays back here, never interacting with the other game's animals. This game's Stegosaurus is the equivalent of me, only rarely leaving my room and keeping social interaction to a minimum. On rare occasions, a meteor can strike in the back area with the Stegosaurus. Apparently, the smallest and least destructive meteor in history, as the Stegosaurus doesn't even react to it. Mandela effect incoming, but I swear this event happened in the mossy plain until my most recent playthrough. Also, not gonna lie, when I first played the game with no sound, I thought these rocks were just Stegosaurus shit. They don't particularly look like rocks, so can you blame me for thinking this was just a Stegosaurus having taken a fat dump? At the far back of the area, a pit of quicksand with a sadly deceased second Stegosaurus can be found. Clearly a reference to the Ballad of Big Al, a nice little touch for fans of the series. Speaking of the Ballad of Big Al, after a period of time, the game will alert you to an Allosaurus that has become trapped in said quicksand, another reference to the special. The game once again hints towards the possibility of this happening by suggesting you place a stakeout camera here.
In the middle of the quicksand is a Stegosaurus. The smell of the area suggests that this Stegosaurus has been dead for a day or two. If you set a stakeout camera here, you may see some scavengers attracted to it.
After some more time passes, said Allosaurus ultimately stops struggling. While it doesn't die on screen, the narrator notes that its time is short. So remember how I said there was one random news event that is guaranteed to occur? Well, once your checklist is completed, the narrator will inform you of a rock slide in the desert. Heading there, you'll find a pathway has opened up, allowing you to climb the cliff. I believe once this happens, the other news events are unable to trigger, but to be honest, I haven't tested enough to see if this is true. Although it's probably pretty obvious to anyone who has functioning eyes, the narrator points out how low the pterosaurs are flying near the cliff, meaning it's possible to tag one of them, and I do mean one, as only one of them flies low enough to actually tag. I'll applaud the composer for making an actual unique score for this moment, as they easily could have just kept using the desert music, but they went the extra mile. While the effect is a bit lessened due to the low poly model of the pterosaur you're riding on, it is still pretty cool to be able to fly. However, the novelty of flying on the pterosaur isn't the only reason to do this. Ride the pterosaur long enough, and you'll be taken to an area you can't normally access, the Salt Lake, once again based on a locale from the Ballad of Big Al. Here the player is given a new ability, the ability to spawn dinosaurs at will. By pressing S and L,
Small or large.
you can summon a Diplodocus, and by pressing A, you can summon an Allosaurus. This area is really just to show off the dinosaur AI, which, like I said, feels like the part of the game the developers worked most on. Of course, the player can just go apeshit in here, spawning whole herds of Diplodocus or whole packs of Allosaurus, and naturally staying here long enough will cause the game to start glitching even more than it already does, but this is for sure a nice and, in my opinion, worthy bonus for 100%ing the game. So that was Dinosaur World. I honestly still think it's a fun little distraction, one you can easily beat in about 20 minutes tops. Hell, even with me intentionally running around so I could get all the news events to trigger, the footage I captured came out to only about 40 minutes both times. It took me longer to edit this video than it did to capture the game footage. And for those who want to get mad at the game for being glitchy, it's still in alpha and will always be in alpha. It's like getting angry that an unfinished movie scene with a CG hasn't been added looks ridiculous. What do you expect? Honestly, the fact that the game is this stable despite only being in alpha is surprising to me. If the BBC decided it was worth releasing, it's gotta count for something, don't it? And even despite the game being a bit of a dinosaurian liminal nightmare, I still have fond memories of it, and I hope that anyone else who had those of this game found this unnecessarily long deep dive on it entertaining. Thanks for watching, and happy Halloween.